Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm usually soft-spoken. First thing, I must really thank the Sayadaw and the association here for being kind, so kind as to let us make use of this place for our retreat. It is not easy to find a good place to meditate. I had always thought that the States, being such a wealthy country, would not be difficult to find a place. Mr. Mitchell here and friends have been trying very hard, and many of them are quite exclusive, if not expensive. Well, anyway, we have very good fortune to come across this place and this kind Sadhus to help us out in this matter. Second thing I would like to make clear. This is a Vipassana retreat. There are many kinds of retreats, many kinds of Vipassana retreats. Here we try to follow as closely as we can the intensive form of retreat, not the one that is too relaxed, which means that we follow the precepts, 8 precepts, and there's observance of silence, besides other things. Secondly, we are following the retreat as closely as we can, taught by the most venerable Mahasi Sayadaw of Burma, the Satipatthana Vipassana method. Of course, everybody does have their own style, way to introduce it. In the many years that I have been teaching, since when I've forgotten, let's say seriously since 85, 95, 40 years, 40 years. And I began to teach meditation after many years. Frankly speaking, I didn't know what I was getting into when I first started. But I tried. I don't think I did so badly. And I've done through many countries in Southeast Asia, East Asia, in Europe, and in the States. And it has evolved somewhat. Not, at least not to the unrecognizable level. We still do our walking and sitting, we still do our rising, falling, and we still all our satipatthana things. So what's the difference between our culture, what I mean is Southeast Asia and Europe, with the original Burmese? Because I was trained in Burma under the Masi Sador disciples, like Sador Pandita Piwangsa. Is the communication. For example, when I first went to Burma, we worked through translators. This is as best as we can get. Now, what I noticed is, first thing, Burma and also Thailand have been very strongly entrenched in the Buddhist tradition for centuries. And so the language and the terms of the Dhamma is very much in their minds. I don't know how true it is, but my teacher told me in Burma, they learn Dhamma while in the womb. You know, because when the mother is pregnant, they recite the Abhidhamma while they're in the womb. And when they're born, and when the mother is rocking the cradle, she recites Abhidhamma verses. Little wonder that Burma excels in Abhidhamma. This is what I heard. Now, when it comes to outside Burma, they are still Buddhists, but they come with other traditions. Fortunately, there is enough sada, faith, to start with. In Europe, there's less of that. The original form of sada from birth and tradition. One thing I want to make clear is that meditation is experience. When we talk of meditation, it's about experience. Words are just a tool to communicate. So when you teach meditation, especially the initial instructions, you're trying to communicate experiences. Yes? When the teacher tells you to do this, he's trying to communicate certain experiences to you. And he would use words which are the tool for the communication. Fortunately for us, when we come to Theravada or Pali tradition, they have preserved the teachings of the Buddha's word, Vacana, in Pali. It was as close as what the Buddha taught. It seems the Buddha taught in many Indian languages at this time. But the closest it seems I was told is Magadha, which is close to Pali. And the scriptures and the words of the Buddha was recorded by oral tradition in Pali. Now this comes to view that one more point. In the communication between the teacher and the student is still largely in the oral tradition, by the word to ears, by mouth. Much later, at the Third Council, they were passed down and written down in Ola leaves, for example, in Sri Lanka. Even today, especially in meditation, it is oral tradition. So that's why I come to tell you the communication is important. A lot can be said about this. For example, I went to Burma. No, I'm not a scholar. And so we asked a Swedish monk at the time that was there. You know Pali. How is it best to learn Pali? Surprisingly, he told me, I don't know Pali. I said, why? You are a Pali scholar. How can you say you don't know Pali? He said, because the Pali uses many words that I don't understand. He quoted, for example, jhanas. He quoted, for example, nibbana, lokuttara, supramanda, all those things. I don't really understand what they are yet because I'm not so well practiced yet. You see, that's where the thing comes when you talk of experience. Of course, we don't talk so much about those lofty states here at the beginning. You can wait until we reach those states. What I'm trying to tell you are what concerns us in the basic instructions. There are certain basic words, Pali words, that defy translations. Of course, we have translations, we can do it what we get, and we work with that. But finally, we are talking about experiences. Take, for example, one example. One of my brothers, when I first went to Burma, and Burma opened up to the outside world, Mahasi Sayadaw went to the United States and went back to Burma. Before that, it was socialist and very closed. Me and my brother monk went to Burma. We were the first Malaysian monks to go into Burma at that time. So we went there and we tried to learn everything we could. My brother monk was quite successful in his studies. Compared to him, I'm a flop. But I emphasize more in practice. He mastered Pali. He mastered Burmese. He mastered Thai. Yeah. The Tipitaka, he didn't memorize the Tipitaka, but we read and so on. In any issue, he could challenge the Burmese monks who were versed in Tipitaka. They challenged certain questions of the Dhamma. The Burmese Sadhu will have his thick Pali books and he will have his thick Pali books and they will question each other. To that extent, he was trained. But he was also the translator for Sayadaw Pandita in Burma and later also in the States. When the first trips, Pandita came to the state, to the IMS and so on. He asked me one question. Why? Is it that Westerners, Westerners here are there, Americans, some Westerners, and Malaysians included, that when we practice our meditation in an intensive way, we get headaches. We create these tensions in the head. Whereas in the Burmese, they don't get that. Good question. There must be something wrong somewhere. Don't blame it on the culture. That was the same thing I noticed when I went back to Malaysia to teach. It boils down to this one mistake of communication. The word sati, translated as mindfulness. In my own research, as I go on in meditation, I begin to notice and learn more and more about this phenomena, this mental state of sati, translated as mindfulness in English. The translation is not bad. I could work with it, but it is not so complete. So you see, from the beginning, if I can recollect my practice, I never thought about that. No, I'm not a very, very careful and thoughtful person from the start. You ask me to do something, I do something. Watch rising falling, I watch rising falling. Do walking right step left, I do walking left. But I never considered the word sati, mindfulness. I may have come across it many times, but I never really considered it. But somehow I got through. Because as I went on, I read more what mindfulness is, how you should be mindful, and so on, including the Pali renderings and the etymology and so on. Even then, I wasn't satisfied. Because the normal meaning of mindfulness given in the Pali translation, called it sarana, and they translate as to remember. When one remembers, there's mindfulness. Something is not right. I'm sure the Pali text commentators and also know very well what it is. It's a simple Pali word. But when translated, something went wrong. Because you see, we Malaysians, when you ask us to watch rising falling, we watch rising falling, we try our best. And believe me, we try our best. What went wrong was we weren't really so mindful. When I ask people to be mindful, I tell them, when I ask you to be mindful, not merely concentrate. What we did in the past was rising falling. We concentrate without mindfulness. We just push the concentration without much mindfulness, and we slowly lose out on the mindfulness, and we may end up in wrong concentration instead. That is concentration without mindfulness. Fortunately, often it's not so bad, but in a long period of time, when you meditate, intensive meditation from morning to night, running, and you push your mind, and you're not mindful, what happens? You develop tension. When you're mindful, that means your mind is balanced, your mind is clear, your mind is peaceful, and these tensions should not build. But it builds, that means you're not really so mindful. See? That's where the first communication went wrong, because the nature of mindfulness was not explained clearly to us. Whereas in these Buddhist countries and so on, they talk of mindfulness, sati. I also sati, And they've used this word for so many centuries. They know what it's about. When you say sati, they know. Burmese is tati. You know. Whereas we, in our age, don't really know. Chinese, for example, many of them, especially Malaysia, in my time, they are more like materialists, like this, earn more money so that we have enough to eat. And so slowly I begin to learn in this, and slowly when I begin to teach meditation in Malaysia, I emphasize this nature of mindfulness before anything else. Because you mistake the nature of mindfulness, everything starts to go wrong anytime. So generally, the different levels of understand mindfulness. Yeah? Usually in my first talk, I give what is mindfulness. The first meaning is most direct and most simple. But being so direct and so simple, most people don't understand what I say. But I say it anyway. The second definition is, the first is a definition of mindfulness as according to reality and experience of reality. Okay? Mindfulness as an ultimate reality, as a paramattha dhamma in Pali. The second definition is sati, mindfulness as from the ethical standpoint. That means mindfulness as a kusala dhamma, as a wholesome state, which differentiates it from an unwholesome state or a neutral state. No? Because Dhamma in this ethical state is moral, immoral, and unmoral. Moral is kusala, immoral is akusala, like craving. Unmoral is abhyagata, which is neither good nor evil. No? Sati is generally used as a moral state, kusala. At certain times, it occurs also as an abhyagata, unmoral state. But for us, beginners and so on, we take it as a moral state. This is important because in meditation, we are eventually building up strong concentration. And strong concentration is mental power. You go into intensive meditation a long time, it becomes very powerful. So it better be in a moral kusala state. Otherwise, you end up with akusala, which becomes worse than you started. Take, for example, if a person meditates and he has a lot of craving for results. I want to have this. I want to get my concentration. I want nibbana. I want psychic powers. The one thing becomes so strong that it becomes strong craving. And strong craving is wrong concentration, and you may go crazy. This is what I first noticed when I first started meditation. When I went to Maharaj Center, I insisted that I do Vipassana only, which is okay for me. That's why I came to the Maharaj Center. But later, Sadhu Pandita, he did teach me Samatha meditation, which means that the teachers do know about Samatha meditation. Probably not all, many of them do. And at a certain point, they do teach. And I gained that a lot from Sadhu Pandita. Even in his last days, when I met with him, he says, Sujiva, says, please continue to teach Metta Bhavana. Because I was taught the 4 Brahma Viharas. But because of the priority of Vipassana, I teach mainly Vipassana. So I emphasize the nature of Vipassana, the nature of mindfulness, which is wholesome, which is, I did a little bit of research and thinking, it comes accompanied by some wholesome factors, which I got it from the Anguttara. One of those Anguttara Nikaya, the first part on the single ones. One is clarity. Second is peacefulness. And third is softness. So when people are in doubt, they are mindful or not, I say, do you have any of these 3 qualities? One lady who was practicing for some time, she said, no, I don't know. How can you practice so many years without knowing it? I said, no, my. See why they don't progress? Because they missed out the very beginning. Now the third comes to the third part, which is a more developed form of mindfulness, which Sadhu Pandita described it in the word Satipatthana, which I later term it as Satipatthana mindfulness. Mindfulness is employed and is practiced, and when you practice the Satipatthana. Yeah. And if summarize the whole thing, if he put 3 qualities. One is Palapana, that means being totally involved and centered onto the object. Usually it's translated as not floating away. Secondly, it is very quick and precise. He described it as when you want to catch something quickly, you must be very quick and precise, then you catch it. At the beginning, we follow gross objects of the body, like rising and falling. Later, we go into finer objects like the consciousness and thinking. So I ask some of my students, which is easier to follow, the pig or the mosquito? Of course, it's easier to follow the pig than the mosquito. After you're trained to follow the pig, then you can try following the chicken, the wild goose. After that, you follow the wild goose, then maybe you can follow the bee or something faster. It's getting very quick and precise. This is true because when you begin to watch and follow the vipassana object, it's a very fast changing phenomenon. So if your mind is not flexible, quick, and precise enough to the present, you lose it. So it is a matter of training. Third is the thorough and all-suffusing mindfulness that is able to observe anything, everything in any form. Because what you're watching is a lot of things, and it changes very fast. And when you watch one thing, there are actually many things there. So it is the power of observation with precision. It's not just any object, it's a moving object, it's a changing object, it's a transcendental object. And so you are being trained slowly, step by step, in the Satipatthana method. For example, we're trying to watch simple things at the beginning. You're rising and falling, you're sitting and touching, you're walking meditation. These are very basic body objects. Even then, if you have done so, you find that it is not so easy. No. Once someone asked me, what's the simplest way to meditate? I said, well, you want the simplest way, which does not mean the best way or the most beneficial way, is to concentrate on one object. And you get concentration. But even then, it's not easy because the object may be simple, but your mind is complicated. Because you ask the mind to follow the rising falling, then you can go to hell. I want to do what I like. So, for example, I tell people, I told them, no, you see, places like Buddhist countries where the faith is strong, when they ask them to watch rising, falling, they follow rising, falling, no problem. But in Malaysia, they ask you to follow the rising, falling. I cannot find my rising, falling. Yes, I tell them, I find it so small, so difficult to follow. This is a Malaysian story. But I went to Europe and told them this. And the Italian told me, for us here, you ask us to follow the rising, falling. We ask you, why must we follow the rising, falling? And so you see, there's a cultural thing involved. So generally, rising, falling is not so difficult to follow. It's always there, and it's a simple object. But still, no, it's not so easy because the mind has to be trained to. So when you get all the three qualities I was telling about, the Satipatthana mindfulness, then the conditions are ripe for insight to arise. You know? So now always give an example, especially the last part. He says, he gives the example of a piece of cloth or cotton wool, a textile. This all-suffusing mindfulness is like you can soak the cotton wool or a textile in the water and it will go into every fiber of the cotton wool or textile. That's the nature of Satipatthana mindfulness. It goes into every bit and small piece of condition in that conditioned phenomena, and it gives you a true picture. It's like giving a right, clear picture to know what it is. No, nowadays people take photograph. It depends on the quality of camera and so on. Now, how clear the picture is depends on how many pixels you have. Right? The more pixels, the more clearer you have. So in this case, the very Satipatthana is one that gives you many thousands and millions of pixels. Because you're not just talking about a photograph, you're talking about a consciousness and the Paramatta Dhammas, the ultimate realities, which cannot be photographed. No, it can be only experienced directly by the consciousness with mindfulness. Yeah. So it's not just a photograph is two-dimensional. This three-dimensional, four-dimensional, multiple dimensional. And so that's where this Satipatthana, when you get such a multiple dimensional clear object with millions of pixels, then insight naturally arises. It cannot be so that your mind is so clear and sharp, you direct it to the object, to the right object, you cannot know what it is. But some people ask a very naive question. How do you know whether you are enlightened or not? Well, the word enlightenment means realization. You don't have a true realization, then you're not enlightened. But of course, there are many people who think they are enlightened, but they are not. That may be more often the case. When somebody come and ask me, how is my insight, how is my enlightenment? I say, I don't want to listen to your enlightenment. I want to see how mindful you are. And they get angry with me. You don't know anything. Okay, I don't know anything, so I don't have to answer your question. Save me the problem. So that's where we talk about first the mindfulness that is direct and involved with reality. The second is the wholesome mindfulness. You got to start it with the wholesome step first, otherwise you go all the way wrong. Third, then you get it very precise and right with the Satipatthana mindfulness. Okay? When your Satipatthana mindfulness is correct, you get a whole inside-out picture of the whole processes. Then insight naturally arises. Right? Now we go back to step one. Now, of course, you may be curious what the first thing of mindfulness is about. Right? This is actually a very simple thing I discovered. What I like to do is to make things concise. Make things precise but concise and as short as possible. I love doing this thing. Some people like to elaborate. If I have to elaborate, I'll elaborate. You see, when I wrote the book, Tree of Wisdom, River of No Return, it's now translated into many languages. Now, one interesting point here is something about mindfulness. I use the word mindfulness many times. Yeah? But you see, Italian doesn't have the word mindfulness. You don't have the word mindfulness. So they use something close to it. See, mindfulness is an English word. Okay? And so they use two words. Sometimes it's consapevolezza, sometimes it's presenza mentale. Correct? Mr. David. Both are different aspects of mindfulness. Mindfulness is somewhere in the middle of the two, no? Here, mindfulness is somewhere between. They don't have the word in between, they have this that side. So when they started translating my book, they are at a loss which word to use, consapevolezza or presenza mentale. Consapevolezza generally means awareness. Different type of awareness, environmental awareness, health awareness, and political awareness, all this comes under consapevolezza. It's more general. We also use it for mindfulness meditation. But when you use this word, you generally use a more general term. It's a wider range of meaning. The other word is more precise. Presenza mentale, presence of mind. Presence of mind is really present here and now. You know what's happening here and now. Presenza mentale. It's rooted in Latin. Presenza is presence, mentale is mind. Presenza mentale. So they always ask me which to use. I can't say it because in different sentences I use it either one or the other way, maybe even something else. So it becomes a dilemma. Anyway, they did something anyway, to get the book out. In the same way, Chinese also has a bit of the problem. I tell an interesting story. When I went to China one time, I was not supposed to give Dhamma talks, but they put me in a chair and asked me to give a Dhamma talk. I cannot stop. But they're doing it at the Chan Zen monastery, old Zen monastery in Jiangxi. It's the original Chan monastery that is still living. It's still practicing. There are monks that are going to solitary retreats and so on. They're all still going there. They asked me to say something, I say something. You put me on a hot chair, you can see what you get. So I told them, look, 我的普华语不大好啊，我是英文教育的人呐，English is my first language. I pick up Chinese later on. I want to ask about this thing called mindfulness. How do you do it in Chinese? And I strictly define how do you translate? Presence and mindful of the presence. Presence and mindfulness in the presence. They are two different things. Presence mind, presence of mind. Two different things. And so I started an argument. All of them are Chan practices. They came from different provinces, all the way. So finally there was no single agreement. But from what I hear about the responses, they know what it is. They've been practicing for so long, like me, flumbering from the beginning. They do know something, but they can't pinpoint out. They have been using it, so they are progressing. But they can't pinpoint it. Can't pinpoint what? The actual phenomena, the paramatra sati. Actual phenomena of reality, ultimate reality, which you call mindfulness, as an experience. Because once you get that, you have it there. Right there, you hit the nail on the head. You know, let me experience it. This is my foot. For example, I say, so and so you go there to meet Mitchell, he's waiting for you at the station. He's a very handsome fellow. He looks very intelligent, and so on. So you have an idea in your mind. So when you go there, you know, there's so many handsome people around, there's so many nice looking and people around. Which one is Mitchell? But if you're there, you just point out, that is Mitchell. Okay, no questions asked, because that is Mitchell. Because they have experienced Mitchell directly. No, but this is not Paramata Dhamma. This is Panyati. It's concept. Sorry, Mitchell. Put it just as a concept. So that's what I mean. If you get to the point of the present reality of sati, then you get right to the point of the practice of what sati means and what sati is used for in the vipassana. So after that, all the arguments around in the hall, I said, but I know one very suitable Chinese word that describes this presence and presence of mind. The word is 自在. The Chinese use it, they use it in the Heart Sutra, for example, from the very beginning, as Zen Sutra, 观自在菩萨. The first three words, 观 is already observed. 自在 is mindfulness. 知 is from 自然, which is nature, natural. 在 is presence, natural presence. 观, mindful, observed, natural presence. These three bring together the actual term of the sati in the Paramattha Dhamma ultimate. So they know. Originally, the Chinese, they know. Another example I told them, the Chinese usually use the word nian for mindfulness. Now the nian character is an ideogram, it's a picture. It's made out of two parts. Nian is the heart, all the consciousness. And below that is the present. And this is the present mind. So you see, it's also the original old sages in the ancient times, you say the Purana Acharya, old teachers, they do know something. But now come back to this, as I say, natural presence. Natural presence. However, there are two things a beginner must be careful of. Which brings me to the second word to explain. Need a second word to explain. Citta. Pali word is citta, which means translated as consciousness. Now, this is actually a more recent definition in the English vocabulary, mind you. Why? Because psychology is very new. It's very recent. It came with people like Freud and Carl Jung. It's only in the last century, I think. Before that, when a person goes crazy, They blame it on the devil. So they send you to Bethlehem house, where you're locked up because you're the demon. Later, it became more human and decided that it wasn't the devil. His mind has gone crazy, which means that they're becoming more aware of the consciousness. There's also one later. So they use psychology. Now, when you say consciousness, it becomes a different thing. They still use consciousness in English, but they use it in a normal word in the vocabulary, which is not the same as what we use in Pali, citta. Because they've been into this mind only recently, whereas these Asians, Buddhists, Hindus, have been all inside this mental cultivation developed for thousands of years. Who knows better? And so how many words have been developed as such? And so that's why this cannot fulfill, but so they use the word, instead of mind, they use consciousness. This is also okay, if you take it more as a technical term. So, in US, Canada, they have a lot of these psychotherapists, they come to meditate. So I asked one of them, one of the things I asked to find out from the different cultures, when I say mind or consciousness, what do you understand? And you find that different places, they understand the word consciousness and mind in different ways. Later, when I look more into the dictionary and so on, deeper, mind is essentially the same as consciousness and can be used. Only the mind is a more simple, consciousness tends to be more technical. Okay. But what is important thing is they don't really point out directly of the phenomena of consciousness. They tell you it's like that, it's like that. So you think, sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. So by trial and error, slowly you learn. But you can point out directly, then you get the whole idea. Just like, in the story where the Buddha was teaching Abhidhamma, in the Tower Timsa, he was teaching Abhidhamma to Sariputta in the world. All Buddha was to point out, and Sariputta understood. He says it's like when you point out to the sea, you see the whole sea. It was what the Buddha taught very concisely to Sariputta, and he understood the whole sea. Similarly, you talk about consciousness or sati, mindfulness. You look at the consciousness itself, then directly, depending on your level of perception and insight, you understand it more or less. Okay. So one of the earliest things I try to point out is there is the knowing mind and there's a noting or observing mind. Okay. The knowing mind is consciousness. Yeah. The noting or observing mind is mindfulness. Still not so precise, but we start somewhere from there. The knowing mind is the citta in Pali, consciousness. The noting or the observing mind is the mental state, cetasika, Pali. They both come together, they're concurrent at the same time. But over a period of time, they're different. At the beginning, you mix up the two. It's okay, you know both as mind. All right, you start somewhere. But as you practice for the differentiation, it's important for more precise practice. Okay. Now, what happened in this consciousness is that consciousness by itself is neutral, abhyakata. But depending on what it associates with, it can be wholesome or unwholesome. If the consciousness comes with anger, it is unwholesome. If the consciousness comes with mindfulness or with loving kindness, it is wholesome generally. In special case, it remains as apyakata, neutral, unmoral. This I start with because I want you to know and to be aware of this thing. So coming back again to the first point of what is mindfulness as a paramatta, ultimate reality. So we have to trace back. No. First, okay, you go back at least to the one before wholesome. You make sure your mind is clear, no craving, anger, delusion. Your mind is peaceful, soft. If you have these qualities and you're knowing that knowing mind is mindful consciousness. When you're watching things, observing things, noting things, and these three qualities are present, it is observing with mindfulness. Okay? It's clear enough. Now, to get them two together, so what I tell people to experiment, to try out. You just sit and you close your eyes. When you close your eyes, you try to be completely present. You're not floating away somewhere, you're forgetting where you are, forgetting who you are. The total presence is there. Totally present. Don't think what is present, who is present, how is it present. Don't think, just be totally present. So by that way, you're totally bringing the mind to the present. And the closest to the present is the present reality of existence. You can really do that and hold it there. All the three qualities, awareness, softness, clarity, all will be there. You know, because it works two ways. The same thing. So when you really be totally present, when you be really totally present, then you have to be really aware, to be really there. And of course, make sure there's no craving, anger, delusion, craving. You just be present in the most natural way. So that the most natural way to what is there. Then you get when you're able to watch the mind, you're also watching the mind, the consciousness that has mindfulness. And in that state, in a very concentrated form, you watch any object, it will be vipassana. You know, if it is not vipassana, that means it has undergone the process of conceptualization. Which means some of those concepts are there, vinyati. And the consciousness may not be mindful. Okay. So, which means that I was coming to the basic point, okay? You recognize these first two basic tools of yours firsthand. Mindfulness, consciousness. When you get mindfulness and consciousness, then you can follow the object. You know, the process of training is very simple. Bhante always tell, mindful, follow the object, observe. You know, when you're mindful, you know the mind is the right state. When you follow the object, the mindfulness become continuous. That means concentration is developed. Right concentration is developed. Then after that, when you follow the object, you should observe the object. Vipassana is basically sharpening your observation power, not thinking, not conceptualizing, pure direct experience with sati. And so when you really concentrate on observe the object, and then you get the point. The Sada always says, be mindful, follow, describe what you're doing step by step. And after that, you describe when you follow and observe the object, what do you observe of the object? Not what you expect of the object, observe. Not what you think you should observe, but what is just there. And observe, if you observe in terms of the Satipatthana method, it's not a superficial observation. It's like a multi-pixel, multi-dimensional camera that takes into what is there. Then it becomes insight. So that's why we say when you watch rising falling, you don't follow. We ask you to describe rising falling. It's fast, it's slow. Yes, for some more, one more can you describe? When pain, yes, pain, but how is the pain like? How it comes, how it goes? This is encouraging you to developing the more precise, more clearer. Your mindfulness suffuse into the object as it changes. And so this is the basic principle. Direct mindful observation, no thinking. In the beginning, thinking is unavoidable. It's habitual. We have to think to some extent, even when we meditate. But when you go into the pure meditation, you don't think. Just focus on the reality and be totally present. This is the first basic principle I tell you. After that, we go through the basic steps, what to watch, what not to watch, what to do. All that comes later, based on this initial principle. Okay? You understand? I hope so. Because the whole practice is based on this. Until progress comes, especially Vipassana Samadhi comes, then certain more things can be done. The first part with the initial instruction, walking, sitting, and so on, is to ingrain into the basic techniques to bring up the Vipassana concentration, Vipassana Samadhi. And you see how the Vipassana Samadhi develops. Vipassana Samadhi is not like Samatha Samadhi. It's different. We talk about this later. I'll end up here tonight now. What time is it?
8:30.
8:30. 1 hour?
Half an hour.
Half an hour, okay. Any questions?
You talk about mindful and conscious,
Yes.
but I still don't know exactly what's the difference, mindful, conscious.
And that's why you see,
Yeah, stupid.
not stupid, because this thing is very subtle. You need experience to see, Suppose Mitchell has a twin brother. Which is the real Mitchell? So difficult to differentiate. Consciousness is the knowing mind. Don't think how it knows, where it knows, what it knows. Is there knowing mind? No. Is there knowing mind now? Yes, you know, no. There's knowing. You just think of the knowing. Don't think of anything else. Once I asked somebody, tell him the knowing mind. He look at me and says, "Do you mean the universal consciousness?" I said, "Don't think of universal. It's just the mind." Okay, it's a chitta. That's it. The knowing. The knowing. Get the word knowing. Take the knowing not as a word, but the essence of the experience of knowing. Yeah, and then it's a starting point, tip of the iceberg consciousness. Mindfulness is being careful, being clear. The first base of mindfulness is clarity. Very clear clarity. Now, is clarity the same as the mind? No. Clarity, you just take the word clarity. The glass is clear. But it's not the mind, but it is clear. All right? But this has to do with the mental clarity. Knowing, just knowing. Without clarity, without the clarity of the mind. Okay? When we say clarity, the mind, knowing mind is automatically involved. You know, when we say clear mind, the mind is also involved. The chitta is involved. But you put aside the thought about the chitta. You just emphasize on the clarity, and then there is the mindfulness.
Okay, does that mean, when you're knowing, you're not clear, probably not clear.
Yeah, you're probably not clear.
Okay, then you're mindful to know clearly.
When you're mindful clearly, then the confusion and anger will all go away. Take, for example, a person is angry. The angry, they call it dosa, aversion, mental state. It's not happy. He want to, but he doesn't like. That is a mental state. Quite opposite of this mindfulness. So when you're mindful, you don't have anger. If anger, you don't have mindfulness. Black and white. Yeah. Okay. When you're angry, do you still know? You can still know. Like one day somebody says, he's angry. You look at him, he's angry. Do you know you're angry? No, I'm not angry. Yeah. Of course, he knows he's angry, but he refused to accept he's angry. Yeah. He knows, no, he doesn't know, he knows. So the knowing is there. So there is consciousness, there is the knowing mind. Correct? So it comes together. But you don't think of the knowing mind behind it. You just look at the anger, and that is the mental state. In the same way, you talk of clarity of mindfulness. You don't think of the knowing mind at the back. You're looking at the mindfulness. But they come together. It's only what you look at. Look at his Mitchell's front face or his back of his head. Which one you want to look? The noting mind is there because this is rising, falling, that's the noting mind. But that's why there comes the point. Some people do noting, rising, falling, but they're not mindful. No, they're just doing like a parrot. Chanka, rising, falling, rising, falling, rising, falling. Sometimes they watch rising, falling, the mind somewhere else, no, but the word's still doing. So some people say, no thinking, anger. Why am I not thinking, anger? I'm still thinking, I'm still angry. Because you're not looking mindfully. It's lip service. But you know clearly you're angry, but you cannot stop it. So there's no real clarity. No clarity of mind, you must look at the mind and see it's actually clear. Just knowing something very strong doesn't mean you're mindful. It's a clarity in terms of a reality, not strong in terms of illusion.
Okay, so does that mean, knowing, in English is a verb. Mindful is the
Adjective.
adjective.
That is the English language communication, right? Here, when you talk of phenomena, everything is to be seen as a phenomena. You don't think about verb or adjective and all those. Those comes under already concept. Just see the phenomena as it appears in your mind. You get the meaning behind it. For example, no anger. The word anger, you think of what all the anger is. Those are second-hand knowledge. When you're angry and you directly look at the angry, anger, then you see directly how terrible it is. It means when you look at the Paramatta, you don't look at it from the point of the word. Look at it as a point of phenomenal reality. Which incidentally you have to use the knowing at the mind door, which comes to a different thing. We'll talk about it in another talk. Okay. Any other question? Otherwise, tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. Is it? It's 5. The first meditation is 5:30. Okay. Sorry. Other retreats we do at 6. 5:30. So at 5:30, please be present, especially if you are a beginner, because it will be the preliminary instructions. No. And I will guide the preliminary instructions from the results I've obtained. They are effective. Because it's guiding the mind, the consciousness, to behave in a certain way. And we're using certain precise words that the mind understands. Like, for example, one meditation teacher says, who is practicing vipassana? Mindfulness is practicing vipassana, not the person. No. It's a very good way of looking at meditation. Because eventually it's the mind that is being trained. Okay. We end this evening with a short aspiration, which I always do. Which means, in English, by my practice, May my mind be purified. By my practice, may it lead to the ultimate peace of Nibbana. And by my practice, may all beings be happy. The sharing of merits between Pali. Idang me punyang asavakaya vahang otu. Idang me punyang nibbanasa pacayo hotu. Imang no punya bagang sabba sattanang dema sadhu sadhu sadhu. Thank you. Tonight we skip with the people are tired traveling and so on. If you want to practice by yourself here, please do so. No, and then tomorrow we start the meditation.